I wanted results fast
Mm-hmm.
because I was looking at the very distinct possibility of being put on a dialysis machine or
Mm.
having one or both of my feet cut off. And I'd already suffered a heart attack in 2013 from my diabetes. And I had cataract surgery in my right eye because of diabetes.
Mhm.
So the four faiths that I, educate you about, 2 weeks ago, I already suffered two of the four. I didn't want to have the other two.
Right, exactly.
I was willing to do whatever it took to get results fast. But I will tell you, I did not expect to get the results that fast.
Right.
After I got the results, that's why I decided to make this my full-time job. It's taken me 3 years to get to where I am now. I didn't have any medical background. I'm a software guy. That's why Dr. Barnett has been so helpful as kind of like my informal academic advisor.
Mhm.
And then using the social audio platform Clubhouse, I got to meet PhDs and MDs from all over the world that helped to continue to educate me. So that's where I am today. Let me begin now with the PowerPoint.
Okay.
We're going to talk about the science. And I want you, if you feel any way confused or you want more elaborations or you want a different analogy so you understand it, stop me. Okay.
Okay.
This is the purpose of the beta, right?
Right.
What we're going to cover today, hopefully, is the role intermittent fasting has in diabetes treatment,
Okay.
the benefits of intermittent fasting, and specifically your concerns with yours and Lana's and my friend Art's concern, obesity and brain fog. Current evidence suggests that intermittent fasting is an effective non-medicinal treatment option for type 2 diabetes. And this is according to this review dated February 1st of 2021. Now, when I started in 2019, there was just a little bit of research and I had to cobble it together. And all this flood of research has been coming out that has been basically validating what has been my hypothesis, which is really cool. We now have the clinical research to back up what I've been talking about since 2019. The biggest question people always have is what is the difference between intermittent fasting and just dieting, right? Which they call caloric reduction. The biggest difference, according to, again, this research that's mentioned here, is both protocols reduce weight. However, intermittent fasting reduces HA1C, which is the top concern of diabetics. Would you agree?
I do agree.
Okay. What intermittent fasting does, it creates mild energy benefits, meaning that because you are adhering to a strict time eating window, people tend to eat less calories. So it creates that mild energy deficit, which we all know is a basic theory for losing weight. You burn more than you take in by eating. And then the most important part about intermittent fasting, it does what is called metabolic switching, which I'll get into a little bit. Are you familiar with the term what a metabolic switch is?
Nope, I was just getting ready to ask you. What is that?
Okay. What is metabolic switching? You have essentially two energy systems in your body. One runs off glucose. Basically, the process is you eat something, it goes down to your stomach, it gets emulsified and starts going down the GI tract where it's emulsified and it's broken down, and those little bits go to your liver through the portal veins. It's then broken down into blood sugar, which is then transported through your vascular system to feed all the cells. Now, this packet energy is introduced to the cell through insulin. And insulin, as you know, is produced by beta cells in the pancreas. It's primarily the energy system that every human being, that's their primary energy system. However, because of our evolutionary background, our species has dealt more when times food wasn't around, right? The human body has another energy system, and this is taking the energy that is stored in our fat cells. when you don't eat for a while is that your body will switch to start breaking down your fat for energy. And it produces what are called ketones and fatty acids. Now, ketones are produced in your liver. So essentially, when when an adipose tissue, which is the scientific name for a fat cell, breaks down, it produces fatty acids. These fatty acids are transported to the liver and they produce ketones, and those ketones are used by your brain for energy because your brain cells can't run off of fatty acids. That's what the role of ketones is primarily to feed your brain cells.
So, question.
Yes.
Is that why? Because I know you spoke one time, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but you were stating that you normally fast you always fast at least 14 hours. Is that the reason why?
Yeah. The reason for that, and I'll go into a little bit farther down the presentation.
Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay. So as I mentioned before, you have two energy systems, right? Your primary energy system is running off glucose. And what happens when you eat more like carbohydrates than your body needs, it takes and stores that carbohydrates, first of all, as what is called glycogen stores in your liver and muscles. But when you've maxed out that storage, then it goes into fat cells. The important thing to remember here is, again, there's a sequence. Your body will always run off glucose first because it's easier for the body to break down carbohydrates than it is to break down fat cells. So until all the glucose in your body is exhausted, right? Meaning the glucose in your bloodstream and also the stored carbohydrates in your liver and muscles, it will not touch your fat stores. Now, what tells the body to make the switch is your insulin levels, right? Because as I mentioned before, when you eat a certain amount, your stomach will tell the brain and the brain will tell the pancreas, hey, we're eating some food here, crank up the insulin so we can feed the cells of the body, right? The glucose. So as long as insulin is at a certain high level, insulin also keeps the fat cells from breaking down for energy. This is the reason, this fact, when I learned this, is the reason I got pissed off at my doctor. Because he's telling me eat less and exercise more, right? But he's giving me daily insulin shots. And these insulin was keeping my fat cells from being broken down from energy. As I mentioned before, I spent 90 days eating only 2 meals a day and exercising my ass off for 90 days, 3 months. I did not lose a single pound. And the reason was my daily insulin injection. That's why I got pissed off and started doing research. Let's talk about the benefits. The whole key for type 2 diabetics and the reason you fast is you want to get in that metabolic state. You may have heard the term called ketosis. Ketosis is when your body has switched to using your fat cells for energy. That's the whole purpose of why type 2 diabetics need to fast, is you need to burn that fat off, especially since it's a hallmark of type 2 diabetics. They have a fatty liver. Intermittent fasting can only give you partial ketosis. It takes, according to the latest research, and as noted here by the famous Cleveland Clinic, it takes 2 to 4 days of fasting for your body to reach full ketosis. Because you got to burn off the glucose in your blood, right? You have to exhaust those glycogen stores, store carbohydrates in your liver and muscles before your body will switch to using those fat cells completely. Now, have you heard the term autophagy?
I have not, but can you go back? Can we go back to the other slide right quick? Okay, on this slide right here, because you said it takes 2 to 4 days of fasting for full
Ketosis.
So what does that look like? Can you tell me what that look like?
We see this phenomenon with long distance runners or you may have heard it in common literature. You may have heard of them hitting the wall. And what all the wall is, they've exhausted their glycogen stores and their body has switched to breaking down their fat cells. Requires more energy, right, than breaking glucose. That's why during the transition, runners have a loss of energy. I actually learned really a lot about the process because I read books, one written by a runner who was also had a master's in nutrition, who studied this because she was a runner. So she gave me a lot of information I needed, because that's what long distance runners do, is usually about hour and a half, because they're running, right? They're using massive amounts of energy. They exhaust their glycogen stores and then they hit the wall and then they get re-energized. You've heard them getting their second wind. That's because their bodies have now fully switched into full ketosis. Does that explain things?
So 2 to 4 days of fasting is that where you going into the what is it, the 16-8 and all that stuff, or no, that's not it?
No, that's intermittent fasting. When you go beyond 24 hours of not eating, that's considered prolonged or extended fasting.
Okay, that's what I was asking. Thank you.
Yeah, I point out that intermittent fasting, the most you can get is partial ketosis, because you still have some glycogen stores unused in your body. And as I mentioned before, as long as you have glycogen stores being broken down in your liver, guess what? Your insulin levels stay high, and that keeps your body from using your fat stores. Autophagy. This is a term you're going to start seeing over and over again when you get into fasting. So what is autophagy? Your body requires a daily source of protein. Usually you get your daily source of protein from the foods you eat, right? Well, if you stop eating, you stop getting that source of protein. The body, once it exhausts its internal stores of protein, will then go into damaged cells looking for damaged protein within the cell and will cannibalize it. So what this does, it clears out damaged and dying cells. It's like, for example, when you take your car in to get it tuned up every 6 months, autophagy is it's similar to taking your body in to get a tune-up, clean out all that crap that you've accumulated, damaged cells and dying cells out of your body, because as long as that crap is in there, it doesn't leave room for new cell growth. With intermittent fasting, you will only get partial autophagy. From the research, again, as noted by the Cleveland Clinic, it takes 24 to 48 hours to get to full autophagy beyond intermittent fasting. You have to get into prolonged or extended fasting. Your body always has a low level of autophagy always going on in your body. For example, let's say you get a cut in your skin. Well, that triggers autophagy, so it clears out those damaged cells, right? And brings in healing. So, but the thing is, with that type of autophagy, it's kind of like passive aggressive. It's waiting for a traumatic event to happen to trigger it. Whereas you do autophagy from a fasting, you're triggering autophagy for the entire body. And that's the really cool thing. Intermittent fasting. The latest research, a 14-10 time-restricted eating schedule combined with a commercial weight loss program provides statistically significant and clinical meaningful weight loss. This tells us that the minimum time-restricted eating you should be doing is 14-10. With type 2 diabetics, I maintain you really need to do about a 16-8, or more ideally an 18-6 consistently. Now, what do I mean by consistently? From my experience and being on the fasting forums, you should be doing time-restricted eating 5 days a week. As you know, before you learned about the potato diet, you probably would have said, there's no way I can do it because of these cravings. This is the reason why the potato diet is the critical first step because we eliminate that.
Now, I will say that that was one of the ways that I did get off of my pills. Is because I was doing the intermittent fast. I was doing a 16-8,
Mhm.
7 days a week.
Oh, there you go.
I was doing it every day. And then I stopped it. And then I noticed that that's when because I went from almost a 10 in my my A1C,
Mhm.
and it went all the way down to like a 5 or 4.5, 5.4, something like that.
Wow, that's normal. You went down to normal.
Yeah, it went down to normal
Right.
because I think it's because I was doing the commercial weight or the weight loss
Mhm.
program. I
Mhm.
was doing the intermittent fasting, and I was also walking and exercising. So I was making sure that I had those things done. That I was doing that every single day. So yes, I know that to be true.
A lot of people who come to me, that's why I always demand, I'm looking for experienced fasters because I'm giving you the science for why what you did in the past works. Because once you understand the science, then you can understand when you get off track, because we all do get off track, how to get back on track and stay on there. That's my goal for you. It's interesting. You're very similar to a previous client. Her name was Renee too. And she also did a 40-day water fast. So, it's just amazing that my next African American client, female client, is also named Renee and also did a 40-day water fast. Well, not a 40-day water, but you understand what I'm saying. Talk about specifically obesity and brain fog. Hyperinsulinemia has gained popularity probably in the last 3 to 5 years. Before, it was thought that type 2 diabetes, adult-onset type 2 diabetes, was caused by being overweight. And so all the therapy and protocols focused on losing weight. And the problem is that they were treating not the symptom and not the underlying problem. Hyperinsulinemia, they're still debating about this, but the American Diabetes Association, which I'm sure you've heard, right? They're pretty respected. Just 2 years ago, finally said that the cause of adult onset type 2 diabetes is hyperinsulinemia, which is chronically high insulin levels. So what does critically high insulin levels mean? All right. It depends. Meaning if you talk to endocrinologists, doctors that specialize in diabetes, they say hyperinsulinemia usually is your HA1C is requiring you to take daily insulin shots, right? For another way to look at it, to me, is if your HA1C is consistently in the pre-diabetic range, which is 5.7, between 5.7 and 6.4, that's to me is hyperinsulinemia. All right. The reason this is so important is because it impacts the flexibility of your red blood cells. Now, what does that mean? Essentially, you have throughout your body single cell capillaries, right? They only allow the passage of a single cell. So if your red blood cells aren't flexible, they can't go through the smallest capillaries in your body. And this is the reason you get certain conditions that is only associated with diabetes, right? Can you imagine? Because we know that some of these smallest capillaries are in your eyes. And you've heard of diabetic retinopathy that leads to, I forgot what it's called, cataracts. And then you got to have cataract surgery, right? I know that because that's what I had in my right eye in 2014. But here's the cool news. All right, because of my protocol, what was it? 2022, 2021. Yeah. In late 2020, in autumn of 2021, I saw a retina specialist. He looked at my eyes. He didn't see any more signs of diabetic retinopathy. So I cleared it organically without medication. All right. Because by getting rid of the hyperinsulinemia, meaning I dropped my HbA1c to normal, my red blood cells became flexible again. So I wasn't starving certain parts of my brain and my eyes, because also it's noted in neurology that the area in your brain that has a proliferation of single cell capillaries is in the executive decision-making part of your brain, the front of your brain. So this explains brain fog. So again, this is really, really important. So once you get rid of the hyperinsulinemia, your brain fog clears up, right? You start getting the feeling back in your feet. You start reversing a lot of the conditions that usually is the fate of type 2 diabetics. Do you have any questions regarding that? This is a really important point.
But it's making it real clear.
Yeah, that's the whole thing.
It makes it very, very clear why certain things is happening, because I told you that I like the fact that you touched a little bit on you know, I just need to get back on track. I just need, that's why I said I was really happy that I came, because I need to get back on track, because I was off track. So it's helping me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, as I told you at the beginning, my role in this, this little short beta program is, I can't teach you everything, but I can teach you how to ask the right questions. And that's the most important thing. All right. So now this is also another point, is that there is a study that does a direct link between chronic hyperinsulinemia and hepatocyte senescence. Now, I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. Hepatocytes are basically your liver cells. All right. And why? So are you familiar with the term senescence?
I am not.
Okay. All right. So senescence is a process by which a cell ages and permanently stops dividing but does not die. In other words, I call them zombie cells, right? They've stopped living, but they're not dead. The reason this is important is that the latest studies show when a cell becomes a zombie cell, it starts excreting inflammatory cytokines, which raises the overall inflammation of the body. So in other words, your liver, your fat cells start poisoning your body. And we see this, right? We've seen people that have type 2 diabetes for a long time. You notice they age faster, right? This is the reason, is because their body is being taken up by these zombie cells that are raising the overall inflammation. And we know inflammation speeds up the aging process. Senescence impacts the liver cells, which leads to, which is one of the causes for non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, all right, as shown by this study, all right. It also impacts the neurons too, right? Because besides not getting these red blood cells through these very small capillaries, you also have brain cells that are becoming senescent. In other words, you've got brain cells in there that aren't functioning anymore, but they're taking up space. And then it also impacts your fat cells, because it's shown that these fat cells, because they're senescent, right, they're not acting normally like fat cells, meaning they're not breaking down to provide energy. So really, how do we address senescent cells? Well, again, how you address senescent cells is through is through autophagy. Remember how I talked that once you get into full autophagy, right, and the body is going into damaged cells, it's either cannibalizing the damaged proteins to make the cell healthy, or it will determine that the cell is too damaged to save and cause it to die, making space for new cells. So this is the reason that, you know, what you want to eventually do is you want to get into extended fasts. All right. The women in my alpha test group, let's see, there was Rebecca, there was Jean, there was Cynthia. I have three women that did 14-day water only fasts. All right. And they weren't young. Well, they ranged from 34, 64, and 54. So they weren't young chickens, right? And they were able to pull it off. And they all reported that, you know, they lost significant amount of weight, and more importantly, they just felt better overall because, again, they're doing a body tune-up. They're clearing out all these old and damaged cells, because another thing that you get with extended fasting, a study out of MIT done, I believe in 2018, showed that when cells are fed on fatty acids and ketones versus glucose, the number of stem cells increases and they become more efficient. So what you're doing is, besides clearing away the old and the damage, you're also increasing the production of these stem cells that then grow into new cells in your major organs. So the studies that were done, as I mentioned, there's that research scientist at USC. He has an Italian name. Yeah, Dr. Walter Longo. He showed that in his mouse studies, that when mice did extended fasting, the equivalent of a 7-day fast, their major organs shrunk by 2/3. But then when they started doing the refeed, those stem cells converted to new cells and the organs regrew back to their original size. So what happened was the autophagy cleaned out all those old and damaged cells. And then it was kind of like rejuvenating those major organs. And here's another cool thing too, is autophagy is going to make your skin look better. Because again, right, skin cells get damaged. Same thing as any type of cell. And when you go to autophagy and the body is looking for protein to use for its protein needs, well, your skin is mainly protein based. That's the reason, remember when you saw my before and after pictures? I had no loose skin, because loose skin is unused protein. All right. Okay. So do you have any questions?
No, it all makes sense.
Yeah.